G'day again, this is video 2 of my Book of Ayden series, chapter 2 as it were, and I want to talk about 3 other concepts slash parts of Team CS. I want to talk about roles versus positions, some default theory and some execute theory. Uh, I'll start with roles versus positions. So every IGL's view on this is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to talk about my view and how that kind of stacks up, and hopefully you could take something from that. So, I view roles and positions as two different entities that exist. So, positions on a map like Mirage, you got your B anchor, your B rotate, your window player, your A rotate, and your A anchor. That's how I'd view positions. They're quite easy on every map. However, roles I view as sharp and smart rifles. If you think back to chapter 1 of this little series I'm doing, where I talk about sharp and smart rifles, what I would do is I would assign sharp and smart rifles to those positions. And each position I feel kind of suits the sharp and smart rifle, the roles. So Bianca would fit a smart rifle because you're stopping it with utility. B short I would have as a sharp rifle, it's more gun up. A anchor I would have as a sharp rifle, just as they're running out. Let's say the default, someone flashes above you, you peek and you're shooting, it's very guns up. And con I would have as a smart player because a lot of the re-smoking bottom con and using utility to defend this area of the map or help A. But how you assign that is really up to you. Maybe you want your A player to be a smart player, of which maybe he's going to be being close, and when utility comes, he's dropping a Molotov in front. So you're playing it like a smart player. And you can change it up depending on the individuals within your team and the positions they want to play. You can play a B site as a sharp player, it's just probably not very recommended. But an example of this is maybe you're holding it from it back here, you're getting a kill, coming back, and then maybe your gun's up. You think actually Shroud on Cloud9 way back in the day, he used to play B sites from way back. That to me would be a bit more of an example of a sharp player on, well, a sharp player in a Bianca spot on Mirage, which ideally you'd want a smart player. Uh, so it can be chopped and changed, and you can play a bit off meta, but that's how I view roles versus positions. Each IGL has their own way about that. But I'm going to move on to the meat and potatoes of this video now, which is more the default and execute theory. So within a default, what is a default? What does it achieve? Etc. etc. Well, in this case, okay. A default is essentially a collection of goals, and you can do some neat things within a default. For example, conditioning. Now, depending on what you want to achieve in your default could have different goals. For Mirage, let's do a simple one of gain middle and con control. Now, that's fairly simple. When you're running your defaults, let's say you've got 2 middle, 2 apps, 1 A site, your 2 people in middle, maybe you would have already started the round with a nest smoke and a top mid smoke. So then from there, these people in middle, they might do like a molly lowers and cross the box, and then the other person might do your flashbang front box for them to peek left side. And that's how they're going to take top middle. As that's happening, over in apps, these 2 players, maybe they're going to double walk down or solo walk down with just a flashbang in front. They're going to take unders and scale up. So this is how you would take towards underpass. And then from here, your goal would be to get into con. And you would have from this point different variations on how you'd want to achieve that. However, it would end up with either your unders player or your other player in middle coming down, double taking this, or solo taking this, solo taking con. And then that's achieving your goals and different variations on how to do that. So maybe instead of putting 2 people top mid, you put 1 person top mid, 3 people in apps, and then you have 2 people taking towards unders. It doesn't really matter too much, but your default is a collection of goals. Now, adding into your default, you can add on conditioning. So a fairly good example of conditioning on Mirage would be, let's say you're starting a default, you're smoking nest and window, and on this default, you would often, again, molly under there and flash in front of the box. Well, what you could do is, instead of doing your default where you gain middle control and then your goal is to gain con control, let's say now you throw this utility, you have 1 person just doing your molly and flashbang, while everybody else is grouping A site and doing an execute. Well, you've conditioned the team to think that you're gaining middle control, and now you're coming over to execute onto A. And this can even be taken 1 step further. If, say, after you gain middle control, you're always fighting heavily towards short, and maybe you're even suggesting to the other team that they should be stacking here when you actually want to end on the A site. But even though that's a basic example of conditioning, it's what you want to set up. But even, for example, let's say, you don't see this too often, but let's say your A player is always throwing a lurk smoke in front of A main, and he's done that 2-3 rounds in a row, and then maybe you have a set round you can call from spawn where everybody actually walks up in this space that's normally created and then does a quick execute and then comes through. So that's another example of conditioning. You're kind of conditioning this smoke to be here, and then you're chucking in something completely different. Finally, in a default, I think it's good to understand risk versus reward. Now, risk versus reward kind of comes in a few different formats. How I like to view it is, let's say you're a B-Apps player, and you're going for a pick. And the pick at the start of this round is maybe you have a deagle, you're coming up here, you're seeing if you're getting somebody jump spotting, and then if you get nothing, maybe you're playing a little bit more passive. That to me is a fairly low risk play for a low to medium reward. You could end up hitting that shot. You can't really like bounce on it and completely take B side as a solo player, but it's going to give you a 5v4 advantage. And other than maybe taking damage from a HE or just missing the shot, there's no real risk. Unless say they have an op posted and you get railed unlucky. The risk is low. But now, let's say it's another play. You defaulted towards apps, you know, maybe you're done a util set and you've gained some space. And now you decide to walk up deep apps and you're fighting this line. This risk is now medium to high, but your reward is now medium to high as well. If you get this kill, you can immediately pivot onto the next guy and basically win the round for your team. You could get this kill and escape, or you might get caught off guard, and as you walked out, you know, here maybe he's on an off angle on this box and he ends up killing you. So the risk to reward is quite high. Now, when would you do either or? Well, let's say we have the default again, which was 1 person unders, 2 top mid, 1A, 1B. If you're the B player, let's say the other team has denied middle control, or they've killed your box player, or, you know, the attempt to take con has failed. Well, now is a pretty good time to do a higher risk reward to a higher risk play to a higher risk reward in apps. Because you're trying to claw the advantage back and you kind of need to take the risk. However, let's say you've gotten an advantage situation and mid has gone successful, maybe you've killed a guy and had con. Well, all of a sudden you solo coming up here and taking this high risk play, the risk completely outweighs the reward, and it's a really bad time to do it because your team's in an advantage. So this plays back to advantage and disadvantage situations, but you could consider it okay with an aggressive player that, let's say it actually goes fortunate in middle, you could actually have, or even as you're running up here, you could have a simple risk of, okay, let's see if you could kill this player. So balancing low versus high risk. So another example is on Dust 2. If you're still defaulting for, say, catwalk control, you don't want your upper B player to smoke out the tunnel, walk out behind it and try for a pick on B. That's a very high risk play, even though it's very high reward. But if that default for cat has gone poorly, maybe you do want your B player just walking out to try and take that one-on-one fight. But an example of what you could do within the default of a kind of low to medium risk reward play is maybe as you're defaulting for cat control, you do a quick flash through the mid doors, just check hard right and then come back. That's not too bad. That's a low to medium risk play to a medium reward. So balancing your risk versus reward is very important. When defaulting. So they're just a couple of things within a default. A default has a lot more going on within, but if you attach your sharp and smart rifles, you're defaulting for a collection of goals, you're changing up your variations when you're doing that, and you're thinking about high and low risk plays, you can generally get away with a lot of situations in a default and claw back advantages and disadvantages. Finally, I want to move on to execute theory. Now, my main point of execute theory is after you default, let's say you've defaulted successfully and you're grouping somewhere for an execute. So let's say you've done that default we've used as an example. Maybe we've got a player in the con or we've killed a player and everyone's leaving middle and we're grouping towards A site. Now the team's got to organize a utility, and I can think of so many times where a team here just doesn't do and execute very well. And there's multiple reasons behind that. But I want to focus on three different aspects of an execute that you can add in after you default is going to make any execute a lot better in my opinion. So the three aspects to focus on are your entries, your smoke rankings, and your flashbangs. So in any good execute, these are your three main focuses. So with your entries, the only people who really matter are your first two entries, because your first two entries make space. Your other players kind of play on that space, get trade kills, and get set up. So you want to designate per sites in games where you want your two entries to go. So on Mirage, maybe you want your two entries to path out, clear under balcony, clear default, and come up towards CT. Maybe you want one entry to come over and clear under balcony and sandwich, while the other person comes out left side clearing under balcony to default. It doesn't really matter where you want your entries, but talking about it as a team to make sure you have an idea of where you want your first two people to go when you're doing an execute in the middle late part of a round. So for example on B, do you want your two people out the window when you're jumping out the window, making sure you're clearing your three angles, so never jump out and be lazy like that. But when jumping out, so maybe you want your first two people out and then clearing up the site together. Maybe you want one person out the window, one person going platform. It doesn't matter too much. Generally when you're executing towards B, two people out the window, one person platform is pretty good. But you always want to focus on where these first two people are going. Where's the space being created? The second focus is smoke ranking. So per site, you want to add a ranking of smokes. So let's say we're coming onto this A execute, we only have two smokes available. Where do we want to use them? Well, you want to add a smoke ranking. So let's say 1, 2, 3. Now CT isn't thrown as much in today's meta, but for the sake of this video, it's pretty good to keep it in. So let's say we're doing 1, 2, 3. That's our smoke ranking. So now that we have 3 smokes and we're grouping for an execute in the middle later part of the round, the team knows, okay, we want to smoke cross first, then we want to smoke stairs. So, alright, let's get cross smoke. Let's come through. Let's do a stairs smoke. And your team's getting that set up. So now we know what's happening with the smokes and what's happening with the entries. And I'll give an example quickly on B site. Maybe you want your smoke rankings to be market window, short, and then maybe market door, or maybe even fireman if you want to hold a smoke for that. Doesn't really matter too much. So then you'd go down and you'd go, okay, here's your market window smoke. Okay, we'll do a short smoke. So if you only had one smoke, you'd just do the market window smoke, and then you'd get ready to come out with the entries as needed. If you have two, you do that. And you're kind of getting your smokes, the smoke ranking down in everybody's mind within the team, so there's no confusion. The third thing you want to focus on is always having a medic flashbang. So what's a medic flashbang? It's a phase 2 flashbang. So think that's going to be your entry flashbang. So people come in with an entry flashbang, flash goes off, your entries start. And then as they're pathing up, maybe you're going to peg a flashbang over Palace, and that's going to be a medic flashbang. So as they're fighting, it's not going to blind anyone here, but it might blind the default player. You always want a phase 2 flashbang, a medic flashbang, and ideally an entry flashbang as well. So what you'd do is you would assign one person who's to be in charge of doing an entry and medic flashbang. Again, it could be this if you're coming at A site. You need to make sure you're hitting your smoke timing, so your cross smoke and your stairs smoke in this case. If you had a third smoke, you do CT as well. From there, the entries know where their pathing are, the first two people who take space. And this makes up the skeleton of an execute. So for B, for example, your entry flashbang might actually be the one that comes through here. So let's say someone's just throwing that, but someone has to be in charge of doing a medic flashbang. So let's say you've got your 2 smokes or 3 smokes, 1 smoke, however many you have. You're following your ranking of what should be thrown first, second, or third. That guy does the entry flashbang. As they're coming out and fighting, you have your flashbang over the top as the medic flashbang. So those are your 3 components of running an execute after a default. Now, there are other things you can attach on, like Molotovs, for example. It does get a little bit more complex, and Molotovs are pretty good. Used in post plants as well, but those 3 focuses, your entry, your smoke, your flash, they make up the skeleton. They're fantastic. That's going to be it for this video. I kind of wanted to dive into defaults a little bit, at least add some thoughts which I have, go over the execute theory, just talk about roles versus positions a little bit more. In the next video, I'm thinking I'm going to talk about communication within a team. But for now, I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and thank you for watching.